Welcome to the Leadership Launchpad Project. I'm Rob Kalwarowski, and as always, the yang to my yin is here out in her cottage, Susan Hobson. Susan, how are you?
I'm in my happy place. You know what happens when I'm in my happy place, Rob?
What happens?
This is where you get the best out of me. I feel like it ain't nothing but peak state and flow when I'm in my happy place.
Absolutely.
I get
It's
to experience some of what you got going on down there, immersed in nature. You should know better than anybody what that recipe produces.
absolutely. And was it Ambalia and we just booked for this weekend, we booked a rappel down Diamante Falls, which is, I think it's the
Oh,
tallest waterfall in Costa Rica. But
wow.
that's what we're doing this weekend. So we're going to have
Yeah,
some
you
fun
are.
there.
Oh,
Uh,
yeah.
and hopefully not die.
Don't even plant that seed, please.
But as always, we got to start off with a quote.
Oh, yeah.
And I have one here from Tim Grover. And for folks out there, he's most known for being the coach for Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade, and other elite athletes.
Yep.
And he says, people who don't pursue their own dreams probably won't encourage you to pursue yours. They'll tell you every negative thing they tell themselves.
Oh my gosh, I love this one so much. Tell us why you picked this one though today.
Yeah. I was listening to the audiobook on my run yesterday and it came out and I was like, oh, I got to write this one down. Um,
I see
but it's
why.
also it's a big common thing, right? And we see this obviously a lot as coaches is as we're accelerating people and they're going and shooting for these greater goals, often the folks around them get uncomfortable and try to hold them back from dreaming big and achieving big. And I think this one thing is the other side of it, right? Is I love the second part. They'll tell you everything negative that they tell themselves is
Mhm,
those are their parts at work.
mhm.
And those parts are obviously judging them for worse than they judge you. And so once we have that awareness, that's when we can start to set ourselves up for success and to go after those big goals.
That's right. That's why we start with self-leadership here at the Leadership Launchpad Project, right? It's all about making sure that we have the capacity to provide the resources that our people need so that they can actually play all out, right? And play their biggest impact game. But if your leader is at the helm and they're not in the integrity of that model themselves, not only is there no inspiration to pull from, right? But obviously that leader doesn't even have the capacity to be able to open up space for you to think in big ways. I love it.
And surround yourself with some great folks and get that support you need. Now we have a special guest with us, the founder at the Venned Group, top 40 under 40 entrepreneur, and the author of another one of my favorite things, an ebook that's coming out shortly called Using the F Word at Work. Kendra Johnson's with us. Kendra, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks, Rob, and thank you for the kind introduction. And I love your reaction to the name of the book as well. That's what we hope it inspires is, some giggles and also then putting it into practice when we relate to things, then we're more likely to use them. So I'm glad that you
Totally.
So Kendra, I come from, the mining world and we use the F word a lot. Uh, can you tell us about which F word are you speaking about at work?
Yes. Well, not the one that gets us in trouble with HR, actually, but using feedback often, obviously, informally, so that we don't have that, the 1 year performance review dread that so many leaders face. And obviously the ones receiving the feedback also dread. So this is all about ways to integrate feedback and the F word throughout your days so that you're using the other F word less, hopefully.
I love that. Kendra, I so want to dig into the F word in just a second, but let's back this train up a little bit and let's plug our audience into who the heck you are and what the heck the Venned Group is and the mission that you're on with the Venned Group. As an entrepreneur, we caught that part, but tell our audience a little bit more about your backstory.
Absolutely. So I guess I'll kind of start from the beginning. I grew up just north of the city in Barrie, Ontario. For anybody that knows, it used to be smaller. Now it's grown. And between then and now, I've traveled to over 40 countries. I've lived above the Arctic Circle, worked in hospitality, which I truly believe set the foundation for the work that I'm doing now. In addition to advertising, marketing, I was prominent in the events world for a little while, and then burnt myself out in a middle management role. Obviously, I wanted to do my best work, prove who I was, prove what I could do, and in the process, I forsake my wellness. So I took a little bit of a sabbatical. I lived in San Diego, then in Norway, came back to Toronto, and about 6 years ago and started the Venned Group. So what the Venned Group really focuses on is training and development, specifically soft skill-based leadership for mid-level leaders. Being in that position myself, and then moving up through the ranks and understanding the just the dire need for communication and soft skill development at all levels of leadership. That's where I really focus my support, and our team really drives home that soft skills are at the crux of every successful business.
And I feel like I can connect these dots, right? Because we play in similar spaces. But what is the connection between this pain that you experienced in terms of that brick wall known as burnout and your passion and purpose to drive the development of soft skills in middle management?
Oh my gosh, great question. So ultimately, being a newer leader at that time, it was hard for me to understand what resources I had available to me. And beyond just, team members and budget, the things that we kind of think of, that come to mind when we think of resources, but my energy and my own skills and my time were things that I did not understand. I didn't know how to manage them. I didn't know exactly where my boundaries were, what that looked like. So I pushed a lot of boundaries, specifically on the energy side of things. And I wasn't playing within my skill set. So not only did I not understand what my strengths were fully, but I also didn't necessarily have the frameworks or the mentorship for somebody else to say, hey, these are your skills. Let's cultivate these. Let's nurture them so that you can stay within these boundaries and really succeed and excel. So it was in taking a step back and saying, why am I burning out? Physically, of course, that's one thing, but also mentally and emotionally. What are the resources that top up those buckets that were completely depleted? And how do I manage those so that I know where my levels are? So in thinking about that, taking a big step back and then translating that over to a program that we run at the Venned Group called Spark. We look at how leaders manage their resources now. First of all, how they identify what those resources are, but then how they manage them based on the strengths that they have and maybe some of the areas for opportunity where they can surround themselves with the people that have complementary strengths. As leaders, I'm sure both of you can attest to this. We don't have to do it all. That's why we build teams. And so that was the main driving force behind turning burnout into something that helps other people succeed and ultimately avoid the struggle that I went through, that pain.
Yeah, the suffering.
Yes.
Yeah. I feel like you're starting to lead us in the direction of the other word that nobody likes to use at work, which is boundaries. The B word.
B word, yeah.
The B word. I actually grabbed this quote from your LinkedIn post this morning. You said, where's the line between being someone's boss and their therapist? And I feel like because we're here to talk about soft skills today, maybe we should talk about that, because I know the pushback that Rob and I get when we start talking about some of the skills that we developed. And I even want to talk about, calling them soft skills and some of the pushback that we get when we even refer to them that way, because these skills are definitely not hard to or not easy to develop, right? But let's talk about that boundary. Like, that's a perfect example, right, of where boundaries really need to show up in support of the leader and their people. So where's that line?
Yeah. Oh gosh, that line gets heavily blurred, I think, especially for newer leaders who might get bombarded with some of those more sensitive conversations, but don't have any frameworks or any guides to follow when it comes to some of the conversations that they might not know how to navigate because they've either never been in that position themselves, they've never experienced it, or they're completely caught off guard. So I think it's really funny that you brought up that it is a kind of dirty B word that people don't like to talk about. And in itself, that pushes somebody else's boundaries, right? Yeah. I always say that if you're so averse to boundaries, maybe you need to check how strong yours are. Right? It's pushing boundaries in and of itself. But the soft skill piece too is really interesting. And a lot of people say, oh, well, we don't like to focus on soft skills, or they're not as important. And at the end of the day, they might be hard to learn when you think about quantifying them or measuring them, but we've been learning soft skills since we were babies, right? We are constantly growing. We learned how to speak and communicate. We learned how to express and articulate what it is that we need. And obviously from that experience, being babies and growing up to now, everybody's kind of taken their own path and explored how we communicate. Those experiences are completely different. So then when we're in a working environment and we're all coming here with different microcultures, as we call them, and different experiences, those boundaries look completely different from one person to the other. And I think that's where we really see those lines getting blurred, because some people say, hey, it's great. I want to talk to you about this, or I'd like to share what's happening at home. And for some other people, that might be completely off the table. I think there's the line between professionalism and also you are a leader in a specific capacity for a reason, and a therapist has a credential for a reason as well. So when we get into some of those more sensitive conversations, what I think employers can do really well is arm their leaders with resources to be able to direct folks when they're encountering some of those, let's say, boundary testing conversations, so that they don't necessarily have to provide feedback or provide advice that might make everybody uncomfortable and also might not be in the best interest of all parties. So,
it's interesting. It's interesting, right? Because 9 times out of 10, all you need to do as a leader in that space is just be empathetic, just listen actively, right? And be deeply present, because maybe that person just needs to let it out or air it out, right? And it's not even about you directing and telling them what the solution is and like therapizing their emotions. It really is. It's oftentimes is like you just need to hold a safe space. Right.
Definitely. And I love asking the question too. Do you want to vent? Do you need me to listen? Are you looking for advice? Are you looking for support? However you want to word it, but what is that person actually looking for? Because Susan, you're so right that a lot of the time it is just to be heard. And with, us becoming more global, there's more disconnect between people now too. And I think people are really just looking for an ear at the end of the day.
Amen.
And to excavate childhood trauma.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Very true.
Boundaries violation.
Yeah.
Susan, that's got to be your book is
the
using the
B
B
word.
word at work.
Yeah.
100%. I love it. Let's talk about soft skills. What the heck is going on with the pushback that we all 3 of us in this podcast studio right now face, right? When we're trying to make a case for these 2.0 human-centric heart-centric. Best practices here in leadership development in 2024. Just saying, why do we still get so much pushback on that here in 2024 when we have so much neuroscience and research and data that backs this freaking approach up?
Yeah. Honestly, it's really quite laughable because, like I said earlier, we've been learning soft skills since we opened our eyes, right? But people look for something that's quantifiable, that shows, especially, senior leaders, what's the ROI on this?
Mm-hmm.
And I always say that you can have a fabulous technical leader who you've put in a role to train, mentor, build up others. But if they can't communicate that technical skill, if they can't course correct based on that technical skill, and if they actually don't know how to set or manage expectations, well, then they're not an effective leader at the end of the day.
Mm-hmm.
And so they'll just be the person that's executing over and over again. And then your pipeline of, whether it's developing leaders or folks who have that excellence in that technical skill will stop with that particular leader. So there is a big ROI on the soft skills because you need to understand that those leaders are actually helping you develop other leaders who are both people savvy and also technically savvy, because they can pass that knowledge on rather than just having it stop with one person. I'm sure you both, as you mentioned, you both see a lot of pushback with soft skills. So what are some of the ways too that both of you navigate that with your clients?
For me, I was listening to the Adam Grant book about hidden potential, and he tells the story about how soft skills even got named. And it's I think this is the part that people don't know. And it makes a huge difference. Is basically it's a military term, and it was developed in World War II time. And hard skill meant literally something to do with artillery, right? It's like manufacturing cannons and guns, basically metalworking for artillery. And soft skills was everything that was not based on manufacturing artillery, right? And so even that, technically then finance would be a soft skill, or engineering would be a soft skill. Depends, right? But it's a lot of professions would be soft skills versus, the folks out there who are, fixing machines or building machines or that kind of stuff. And so even just that changes the context of what we think of as the terms.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I would say I always go to the neuroscience, right? To try to quantify. That's based on the data and the research, right? Neuroscience now states that only 20% of our potential is actually predicted by our IQ. And the other whopping 80% is predicted by our EQ. And that's emotional intelligence. I know that's where you're going with this article in terms of oh my God, I have to deal with all this emotion. I'm not a therapist. Well, no, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the empathy piece. We're talking about being present and available in a way that feels safe for your people to be able to open up, whether that comes to feeling like they have the psychological safety and trust to be able to share their ideas or challenge the status quo or offer their feedback, But yeah, I think there's, this is why Forbes rated EQ the number one leadership skill of them all here in 2024, right? So it turns out the soft skills are the top skills, according to them.
Yeah.
And the research.
Definitely. And soft skills, I've heard people call them power skills, human skills. At the end of the day, no matter what you call them, they are number one. The second you leave the workplace to when you enter, those skills help you both inside and outside of those walls. Mm-hmm. And, being empathetic is also helping to take a step back and understand how you can obviously support the folks in your community. Mm-hmm. But as leaders, I truly believe that when we can lead by example. So we can listen, we can be empathetic, we demonstrate those soft skills and that high EQ. We can support others in that. We open the door for opportunities and building community. And I think that's what really good leaders do, is they create that safe space and that community where they don't necessarily have to be the ones then that person comes to every single time, because you've created psychological safety in a group setting as well, right?
Yeah.
Kendra, a question we get a lot is, how do we as leaders be both empathetic but also hold our teams to high performance, and like give that, sometimes it's giving that feedback that folks are underperforming or that we need more from them. Like, how do you answer that question?
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I think what I'm about to say will resonate with both of you, that
I use the F word.
That's perfect. Yeah. Just use the F word so often.
Yeah.
But also go for a coaching approach, right? We shouldn't, you should constantly be checking in with your teams. And I think using that proactive approach, first of all, helps us understand what's going on day to day. And as the world seems to spin increasingly more quickly these days, deadlines are flying up and people feel a little, what I've heard recently is people are feeling a little bit underwater. So as leaders, checking in, being empathetic, and then being agile and able to reprioritize and to set and communicate different expectations, but have that two-way flow of communication. And I think that is key, where historically it's been pushing information one way. So you're not getting that feedback from your team members to say, what's actually going on? Is this realistic? Will we get the work done in time? And will it be of the quality that we want, right? What can we reprioritize instead, if possible? And if people aren't meeting our performance goals, understanding why. It's, it might not be that they're just not good at their job. There are so many underlying factors, and that's where the empathy piece comes in. But one thing that we always run one exercise is I introduce what I call a Presto. And if you remember back in Toronto when they first introduced the Presto cards, I didn't know how to reload mine. And it was this tiny point of friction that caused me to walk all over the city because I was too embarrassed to ask somebody how to load this damn card. And it's something so silly, but I see that with so many leaders that they're afraid of what will people think, or they'll think I'm not competent, I can't ask for help. And it's those tiny Prestos and those tiny points of friction that actually prevent us from hitting those top performing marks, rather than necessarily something that might be a full skill development. How can we remove those tiny points of friction? By being empathetic, but then by having those two-way conversations and being proactive in our approach, asking how folks are, what they need, and then reflecting when things go sideways.
Yeah, because ultimately, to feel empowered, that person needs to have the confidence, the competence, and the business resources. And how many times does a leader forget to check and vet that? And you know what I'm saying? So the empathetic approach helps you to check, vet, and validate that your people actually have the resources, going back to that through line, right? That they need to be held accountable. And then I feel like once you do that and you make sure they're all systems go in terms of the support, then challenging them and holding them accountable to that high standard actually lands as care.
Yes.
Like I always knew my coaches cared about me when they were trying to challenge me and, get in my grill a little bit about what I could do. But I think it only lands as care if you take the time to come through that empathetic door to make sure that that person is actually feeling empowered to be able to go after that deadline or whatever.
Definitely. And one thing, I'm not sure if you both see this with senior leaders as well, but you have so much experience and you've mastered certain skills that when you're then coaching somebody else, and I mean, obviously you both have the coaching framework, so not you, but with your clients, somebody who's just starting has no reference, no context to what those skills require and the process you've taken over the course of 10, 20, 30 years to build those things. So I find that often too, for a lot of senior leaders, when they're delegating or when they're empowering, they need to take a step back again and recognize that their step, somebody else's step one is actually their step 2, 3, 4, right? That the steps are different. We need to start at what might actually be step one in that learning process.
I'm curious what your thoughts are in terms of why, with all of this knowledge and everything we've been speaking about today that is oh so critical and important here in 2024, why is it that burnout is the most rampant it's ever been in human history? I think we read a stat yesterday, Rob, correct me if I'm wrong, that burnout, Gallup's predicting that 83% of people are going to experience burnout this year professionally. What's going on here? As somebody who's experienced burnout themselves and has done all this amazing work and turning that pain into purpose, why is it the highest it's ever been?
Yeah, I mean, from that angle, that's wild. That statistic is actually really disheartening. I think there are a couple of reasons from my perspective. One is that, again, we don't understand that burnout is a lot more than just the physical side of things. So it's more than just being overworked, but it's also a lack of fulfillment. And that can drive burnout. Where I actually recently had a client who thought that, he was working so much and he was attributing his burnout to the physical experience that he was having. And when we took a step back, we realized he didn't have the support of his team. He didn't have the growth opportunities that he wanted, and he wasn't doing the work that he loved. So ultimately, he was experiencing that mental, emotional burnout. And I think that's something that we see a lot with leaders is we think like, oh, I'm fatigued, or, oh, I'm working overtime, so that's why I'm burnt out. Nobody takes a second to stop and think, am I just not fulfilled? Or is there something emotionally I'm missing that connection with my peers, with my team? I'm missing that mentorship. I feel like I'm failing because I don't have, that goal in sight, whatever that might be. I find that those two contributing factors often drive burnout, and then it manifests and shows up in the physical sense.
And what is your counsel there? What did you tell this client to do about it? Like, how do you help to coach somebody, right, when they're that out of alignment? You mentioned 3 major pillars of alignment that he was missing.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I mean, you hit the nail on the head there, Susan. The number one was alignment. Are you in an environment that is aligned with what you want to be doing, who you are? And the ultimate answer was no. And it ended up being a parting of ways that was best for all parties. And it was understanding what that alignment looked like for that particular individual. So oftentimes, obviously, retention is the number one goal, is to keep people happy in the location. But at the end of the day, if there is an alignment, then it's not great for the employer. It's not great for the employee. So he'd already come to this conclusion on his own in terms of coaching. It was more, what's your next step? Why does this feel like the appropriate move and the solid move? What brought you to this place and this realization? But I think it was ultimately kind of gauging and just asking him those reflective questions to say, okay, remove the hours that you're working, remove the day-to-day. When you walk into that environment, what lights you up? What makes you excited about going to work? And where do you see yourself going in this particular path? And he couldn't really answer many of those. So that brought us back to, okay, is this the aligned place for you? What would be the ideal environment? Listed everything that was opposite of where he was. And again, had so much respect for the employer. They're great friends, but it was just not the right fit. And I think that's okay to recognize too. And we need to be more mindful of the environments that we're in and how those actually impact our overall well-being.
Love it.
That's a hot button issue now.
Yeah.
It's something I talk about a lot. But Kendra, I would love to hear your thoughts on, like, if you could tell the folks out there one thing, what would that be?
Oh, that's
Mhm.
just one, eh? I would say that the number one thing I would let everybody know is understand yourself and your resources first. You can't show up as an influential leader until you know what's influencing you. And taking the time to do that deep dive to understand your resource management styles, your communication styles, how you actually interpret and synthesize information will help you actually provide better information and be more influential and impactful for those around you. So start with that self-awareness. Nobody likes to hear that, but get curious about what makes you tick.
Nobody likes to hear it, even though it's the best play in the playbook, right? It's like everything in the new school approach to leadership hinges on that one soft skill known as self-awareness.
It's true. And you know what? It's not bad. People are scared of what they'll find. But in my experience, it's normally wonderful things that are uncovered. I didn't know I had this strength. I learned something about my team member in the process that we think of the what ifs in terms of the negative sense. I don't want to know what's bad about me. But what if you actually uncover some incredible strengths that you didn't know you had? And so, there's power in that.
Yeah, that's the pleasure motivation. The pain motivation is if you're not curious about what's running you, then it's inevitably going to run you in all kinds of places that you don't want to be, right?
Absolutely.
It's a ticking time bomb is what we like to say.
Yeah.
I got to pull out our big guns while we have you in studio. So I know that last question had you think, but how about this one? What would you like the legacy of this mission that you're on to be bringing these soft skills to the world, right? And all the ways that the world needs it more than ever. What would you like the legacy of that to be someday?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I contemplate on this often. The legacy I'd love to leave is that community and the way in which we impact and influence others really starts with ourselves. I think for myself personally, I'd love my legacy to be, wow, she really lived her values and I was aligned with those, which then translates into building a community of like-minded, amazing, self-aware folks. I'd love for people one day to say, wow, she had an amazing Rolodex, not from a place of, and for anybody that doesn't know what a
Power.
Rolodex is,
Yeah.
it's my contacts in my phone, but not from a place of power, but from a place of community that was built. And I think that, our networks help us succeed. And for myself, I want to be able to have a community of people that are connected because of the Venned Group long after I'm gone and continue to pay it forward. And soft skills training is the vessel that we use, but really it's at the core, it's about community and about connecting with the people around you and your environment.
Full circle moment. That's where we started, Rob. You said it's all about the law of association and the people that we surround ourselves by, right? Off the top with that quote. But yeah, rising tides lift all boats. I love this legacy.
Yes, thank you.
It's so good. And for folks out there, if you want to connect with Kendra, I've dropped her LinkedIn in the podcast notes, as well as you can check out her website, venndgroup.com. Now, Kendra, can you tell us where can folks get your ebook Using the F Word at Work?
Yes, so it is available on our website, venndgroup.com, for pre-order currently, coming for real order soon. And it's also highlighted in the featured section of my LinkedIn profile. So it'll be there ready to download with some takeaway worksheets as well to actually implement the information and write out the F word often. So I appreciate that direction there.
Absolutely. And so folks, check that out. For us, obviously hit subscribe to Leadership Launchpad Project on your favorite podcast platform. And for all things one-on-one executive coaching, leadership development, and more, head on over to highperformance.com. Susan, where do you want to land the plane today?
Well, I love a woman with a dirty mouth and somebody who turns pain into purpose. And that is definitely what you have done, Kendra. And in a way that really seriously serves what the world needs more than ever. Burnout has never been more rampant in human history, and there is no excuse for that because we have been using the F word, right? That's what all the data and the research is. It's the feedback from our community, our collective. And so rising tides lift all boats. I feel like that's where we all got to get into alignment after this show, right? Is getting behind this mission that you're on to make sure that, yeah, soft skills are just a part of the repertoire, not only when we're kids and coming through school, but yes, oh yes, when we get into the business world and become leaders, for damn sure.
Definitely.
Love this message. Thank you.
Thank you both for having me.
Yeah, I love it too. And I just, for me, I think the message of community is so amazing.
Mm-hmm.
And what I would love most for people out there is connect with someone, one person, a friend, a family member, someone at work, but somebody who sees you as the leader that you are and empowers you to go out and take that big goal on.
Mm-hmm.
Because by doing that, it's going to impact the folks around you and it's going to change their space too. Kendra, thanks for joining us today. It was amazing to have you.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me. Great conversation.
Mm-hmm. Totally concur.
Everyone, thank you so much for listening. And we'll see you all next week.
Bye, everyone.